This conference will now be recorded.
All right, this is the week 3 live session, and we're going to just quickly look at what you did last week. This is Sarah's work for Big Easy Cookies, and looking at these icons, they're all 3 of them are good options. And what we looked at is here in this logo test. This is kind of how your logo looks when it gets small, and can you see it, and does it make sense? And like for instance, this riverboat now kind of disappears. We kind of Professor Kira and I kind of gravitated toward the voodoo doll. But then you've got this gator blowing a horn, which I also think is a good thing. I don't know if you need the containing shape, or maybe it could be simpler, but you get some good options there. So this is how this process is supposed to work. What Sarah has done is how it should look, and all in the template. What do you know?
Yay!
Sarah, do you feel clear about what to do next? Probably not, because we haven't talked about it yet. All right, let's go over this week's work, what we're doing. So for this week, you're going to do 2 things, which is create an identity package, and in the course of doing that, develop your color palette for your brand. So some of you may not be familiar with what an identity package is, so we're going to go over that, and a little bit about color as well. The thing I would say about working with color is usually just going in the abstract and just picking colors without using them doesn't work so well. What you want to do is actually sort of use them, try different things, and figure out what works best through the course of designing different elements. So when you design things, then you use the colors, and eventually you'll come to settle on the colors that you think work the best, and that's when you're going to document those for your creative presentation. I'm a little sidetrack here. So logos. So you've all been developing logos last week. Has anybody ever seen this logo? Did anybody? Yeah, no, never seen it.
It's probably a good thing.
Yeah, so this logo, this is the first logo for Full Sail, the first one I know of. And there's some things that are good about it and things that are not so good about it. What's not good about it? What's bad? Looks like Treasure Planet, the movie, yeah. Can you guys tell me things you think don't work about this logo? Uh, the boat and the clouds probably could use some more emphasis. Yeah, they're a little small overall. It's also, there's a lot of complexity, right? The type has an outline, it has 3 dimensions, it's got chrome. There's a lot going on. The icon itself is really more of an illustration with gradients, full color. It looks great when it's big and on the side of a van in the 70s. But when you try to put this on a business card or in letterhead, it really doesn't work. It sort of falls apart. And that's kind of where they ended up. The story I heard was that the illustrator who created this ship sold it to Disney, and Disney said cease and desist.
Oh.
No, that's the story I heard. Anyway, does anybody have a theory as to why it's a flying ship? No. So originally, like the Full Sail mission was to overcome obstacles to get you to your dreams. So with that statement in mind, a ship flying kind of makes sense. It's overcoming obstacles, it's flying in the air. The other thing that this has going for it is called paradox. So ships don't really fly. So the flying ship is paradox. It kind of is eye-catching and distinctive. Now, it certainly is a derivative of Peter Pan, and I think that's where they got into trouble. But all right, so then they moved on to this logo. So they ditched the ship. In place, they put a plane. So plane flying also overcomes obstacles the same way, same idea. The one downfall of that is that planes actually fly, so it's not really Paradox anymore. But what with some things you would say about this logo that could be improved? You guys are typing it out. Yeah. Get rid of the spotlights. Yeah, there's additional complexity here, right? So it kind of has a deco look, sort of. Miami Vice, it's very,
I was thinking 90s, like Saved by the
it is
Bell.
the 90s color scheme, and but it's got a deco, which was hot in the early 90s. This font was really hot. I remember that. Bodega, I think is what that is. But some unnecessary complexity still. Um, And again, if you put this on a business card, it doesn't work so great because the type gets really small. The icon, having it all integrated makes it not work as well. So then we ended up here. So a lot simpler, getting cleaner. But what's some obstacles here on this one? Yeah, the plane in front of the text. So the plane obscures the text just enough so that if you didn't know it said Full Sail, you might not be able to read it. The plane's fairly complex as well. So then we ended up here. This is the one we're at now. So I hope you see sort of the benefit of this configuration of logo, a simple icon logo type. It works in horizontal and vertical. There's horizontal, vertical. If you go on the website, this is one you'll see. So you can see how we got here over time, a little bit of simplification over and over again. And now this works well on all applications. So that's kind of where we ended up. All right, so let's talk about this week. Week 3, identity packages and color palette. So this is what you're going to be designing. It's an identity package. An identity package is a classic design sort of milestone when you create a brand: business card, letterhead, and envelope. It's a little old-fashioned, but we're still sort of using this because it does sort of create a place where you can express your brand. So now you're going beyond the logo, you're creating a color palette, and you may add additional graphic elements to help brand your items so they look like they go together. The whole idea is that you put these all together and they feel like a family, like family resemblance. People often say identity and brand, but brand is more of sort of the idea, and identity is how it gets expressed. So, there's a Disney brand, but then it's expressed through, for instance, Mickey Mouse. Finding that single vision that accurately communicates your brand. So color is a huge part of this. That's why we have this assignment in color theory. But there's also other graphic elements, and it can include all kinds of things. Beyond the identity package, you could have uniforms, signage, you could have trucks, vehicles, planes, all that stuff. So we're talking about branding for a corporate identity. You're trying to get a look and feel for your business. Here's an example. This is from Pentagram, the great design firm in New York, and this is Michael Bierut's project for Bobby's Burger Palace. You can obviously see the logo, right? Looks like a burger. We also have a color palette, and you see how they use that color palette throughout the interior of the store. It's used on the signage, all the packaging, and the business card, and it starts to feel cohesive, right? Feels like it's coming together. This is what you want. You want to be consistent and have a sort of enveloping style. This is a company out of Russia. I don't even really know what they do, but if you see, this is a billboard, printed materials, a presentation template, banners, signage, but they all feel like they're part of the same family. What do you think makes it feel that way? Yeah, the colors. Yeah, for sure the colors. Now, the colors aren't just like flat swatches, right? They're using a gradient, and they use that gradient over and over again. That's okay to use a gradient. They also are using these sort of knockout graphic elements that look like infographics. So the combination of the soft gradients and these knockout white elements starts to create a visual language that makes it feel more cohesive. Here's a different example, but doing the same thing. So this is Bespoke Trading Company, and this is a very muted color palette using this sort of muted desaturated photography. But there are graphic elements like this wax seal and the typography and these little arrows and things like that that tie it together. The fact that they're using this kind of craft paper is part of the look of it. So you're trying to figure out what are the different elements I'm going to put together that say my brand, that look like my brand and not anybody else. Touch point. All right. So if you think of your brand as a person, a personality, sometimes that helps, you know, like how do they dress? What do they look like? These are all big brands. Which one of these people went to jail?
I know.
All right. Professor Kiro, which one?
Miss Martha Stewart.
Martha Stewart, yes. Now, Martha Stewart went to jail for insider stock trading, but she rarely talks about it. She's remained religiously consistent in her brand image. She still is like the nice lady down the street who makes cupcakes, but she's a powerful woman in charge of a billion-dollar media industry, and you know, she's managed that because of her consistency. Really, really works. Now, some of you may have seen her in a TV show with Snoop Dogg, which is a lot of fun. The reason that works is because both she and Snoop Dogg have very clearly defined brands for themselves. And so they're able to mix. If you had somebody sort of weaker there, the other person would overwhelm them. But since they're both very strong and very consistent, it actually kind of works to mix them together. All right, so areas of visual exploration. So as you think about it, you know, you've worked really hard on your logo. Now you're going to add color to it. But what else can you do? You want to think about nature. Are there elements of nature that you could bring in to use? Wood, foliage, sky, clouds. There are all kinds of things that you may consider part of your brand. Texture, wood, stone, bark, gravel, sand, all kinds of things that you can use as background elements that also will tell a bit of the story of your brand. Patterns, you can create patterns very easily in Illustrator, and using some of your existing graphic elements like pieces of your logo or logos that maybe that didn't make it. So Sarah, for instance, you know, if you use the voodoo doll, maybe the gator appears as part of a pattern or something, or even the fleur-de-lis, you could use that in some sort of pattern way. And their way, you're creating another graphic element that tells the story of your brand. Paper texture. So we're sort of simulating some printed items, business card, letterhead, all that. So they'll be printed on paper. What kind of paper? Recycled paper, as we saw with Bespoke, like craft paper, or is it very shiny white paper, translucent paper? It's up to you, sort of simulating that. Professor Kira is a mammoth expert at paper.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So she manipulates paper in amazing ways. So paper is a cool thing, and once you get into it, it's like addictive. Like you really can get into paper. Graphic elements. These are like decorations, borders. They could be little icons and things that create additional sort of flavor for your brand. And last but certainly not least, color. You're using color. This is color theory. You can use gradients now. You can use color in interesting ways. So you're exploring all these elements as you create your identity package. All right, here's a logo, Lucy's Fried Chicken. This is another pentagram project, Michael Beirut. Now this is a word mark, but it's really well-crafted word mark. What's your feeling about Lucy's Fried Chicken? What do you think it's like? Moist, the most hated word in the English language. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, moist. Okay. So, would you say it's a little bit retro, right? It feels a little old-fashioned, maybe. Uh, yeah, 50s, right? So can you think of a reason why retro and 50s might be a positive association for a fried chicken restaurant? I was hoping Dominic might chime in. Not at the moment. Well, I think there's a universal belief that people have that food used to be better, like in the old days. Grandma always made it better than anybody else. So retro tends to be a positive association for restaurants. Fried chicken in particular, because as we all know, fried chicken is good, but not good for you. So kind of being a little indulgent. So now here's the neon sign. So you can see a bit hedonistic, a bit indulgent, a bit naughty, all those things. Can you see how that's a positive association for fried chicken? It's not too erotic or sexual. This is kind of a pinup from the 1940s, I would say, like World War II era. But it gives you that kind of a little bit of hedonism, like sinfulness that you get when you eat delicious fried chicken and realize you're consuming hundreds of calories per bite. So they push that retro thing some more. There's this they use this wood paneling as the background on the front of the menu. They've got this sort of old drawing of a chicken. They created a little egg with an LC in it. That's kind of a cute thing. It's really kind of a cute project. So strength through consistency. So the other thing is to remain consistent because as human beings, we only really want to have consistent relationships. If you have a friend and they're in a terrible mood one day and a good mood the next day, they forget your birthday, they're always late for lunch, they're really inconsistent all the time, you're not going to be friends with them for very long. It's kind of difficult. And the same is true with brands. If brands are really inconsistent, people tend to step away. Um, a big example of this was Target, which is, a very successful brand, but they had garden centers. They introduced those and turned out they were good garden centers, but people didn't want garden centers from Target. They didn't associate that with Target. So it was inconsistent and therefore rejected. And they don't do that anymore, but just only because it was not what people were used to. These are the elements. We'll go over more of that later. All right, so this is what you're going to try to do. Create a visual identity system. So that includes the logo, includes color, and includes all those graphic elements we just talked about. Coordinate them all so they look like they go together. Establish a positive image for your organization. Give it a personality. Make sure the design is appropriate for your target market. So it can't be super hipster if it's for people over 65. And vice versa. You don't want to do old retro stuff for young people. Avoid fads. So all those kind of logos that have a crossbar in the middle and established year and very trendy right now. And stand up to your competition. So looking at what your competition's doing is really helpful because it kind of gives you the point where you stand in the crowd. Examples. All right, so here's a restaurant, Bone Daddies. What comes to mind when you see Bone Daddies? New Orleans, yeah. It does have a New Orleans, very South Louisiana feel. It's got this, what I would call primitive art, which is very Southern, old Southern. That seems like a positive association for barbecue, right? Yeah, Sarah, what part of the country are you in? Midwest. So you don't have barbecue there. Missouri, you have Red Hots. Oh yeah, Missouri, St. Louis barbecue. Oh my gosh. Yes, of course. All right. So Yeah, Kansas City ribs, man. Oof. I have great memories of going to Kansas City. All right. So, but you can see how this is like definitely New Orleans, very southern. And if you're a vegetarian, you're probably going to avoid this restaurant because it's clearly meat. You see the color palette. It's got red. It's got like red meat and mustard yellow. It's very muted. The paper color, it's not pure white. It doesn't feel particularly neat and clean, but that's okay because that's not what you expect with authentic barbecue. Here's a beer called Swing Beer. What do you associate with this? The 20s. Yeah, it does kind of look like the 20s. Most people say the circus or carnival, which is kind of what makes me think of, which is a kind of weird association with beer. So I feel like this is branded well. I mean, it's consistently designed and definitely comes across a certain way, but I'm not really connecting that with beer. So you can be branded, but branded wrong. Here's Kate Peters photography. What kind of photography do you think she does? It looks like cake. Yeah, a little bit. Um, I think this is well designed. It's an interesting design with the sort of focal planes coming in, but it's not really branded to tell me what she does. You know, what kind of photography? Is she corporate? Does she do portraits of kids? I'm not really sure. So you can be well designed, but not branded enough. So these are the things you're kind of steering between. You want to be well branded and also well designed. Here is Carthage Stoneworks. What's your feeling on this one? What does this look like? It definitely, yeah, masonry. It definitely has a retro feeling, wouldn't you say? Old fashioned. These stamps kind of look like old logos from the, like a Union stamp, a Union logo from the early 20th century. The typography and all the design looks very early 20th century, like the 1910s. Um, pop, Probably a positive association for Stoneworks, retro, right? Because experience means as much as expertise. So retro works for Stoneworks, right? Because we think of that as being better in the past. People, craftsmen, people used to really know what they're doing in the old days. We see examples of fantastic stonework all around and marvel. Who did that? How did they do it? Um, if this was a cell phone company, retro wouldn't be good, right? Here's a dentist, Dental Works. What's your feeling on that? Yeah, not too much on dental, right? So they're trying to make humorous statements to disarm you and make you feel more comfortable about going to the dentist, right? But they're setting the type and making it look very serious. So it's a little what we say tongue in cheek, so to speak, for the dentist. Um, so it's kind of like you're pulling your punches a little bit. Like we're going to be funny, we're going to say it in a kind of serious way. And the color palette kind of helps this clean mouthwash look. Some people have a problem with the yellow for a dentist, but it's very bright and cheery and kind of friendly, right? All right, here's an identity package for an architect. And I'm just going to go through some of the techniques they're using that work. Um, this is a letterhead. You have the logo is the hero. You work really hard on your logo. Now it gets to be the star of the show. The information is sort of around the edges because essentially a letterhead is just a frame for a letter. A letter goes printed in here. Don't put a bunch of stuff in the middle of the letterhead. It'll just junk up the letter. This one, they did a flood color on the back side of the paper, which is very fancy and kind of nice. The envelope, they put the logo on the front. They probably put the return address on the back. This is okay. It's pretty minimal. Business card. icon big on the back, full logo on the front. And if you notice, there's hierarchy here. So the person's name and title are the next most important thing. So they put her name in a color, title set off from the rest of the information, which is gathered neatly toward the bottom. This is probably a note card envelope with the initials. Here's another identity package. So another architect, Finkel and Williams. This logo looks kind of like an FW, the icon, and they actually blind embossed it, which is to press it into the paper without ink down here at the bottom. Kind of a nice thing to do. Information organized out of the way. Envelope, a distinctive color. But if you think about color on an envelope, it has to be light enough so that black type can go on it, because people run them through a laser printer and they have to have black type. The business card, they put the full logo on the back, but not on the front. That's okay. They have the person's name and title, and then all the information gathered together. They also did a blind emboss again. It's kind of cool. When you look at the template, and I go over this in the video of the template, but you have 3 lines for every printed piece. Anything that's printed gets this, like a safety, a trim, and a bleed. And the reason for this is when they cut things after they print them, the cutter bounces around a little bit, and you need to have a little wiggle room. So things that go to the edge have to go past the edge, and things that you want to remain on the card have to stay in a little bit. So that's what that means. This is all the stuff that could potentially go on a business card, but certainly you wouldn't put all this. You want to sort of focus the hierarchy on the key things that you need. The person's name, their title, the company name, which will be in the logo, address, phone number, email, web address. That's typical. So, and gather it in a sort of a hierarchy. Need water. Business card, keep it simple. It's a small space, but it's still a page design. Don't do a lot of special effects. If you have additional graphic elements, use them discreetly, and you know, don't junk it up with a lot of stuff. Letterhead, as I said, is a frame for an envelope, 8.5 by 11. The envelope, nothing goes here because the stamp goes here, and nothing goes down here because this is where the post office prints a barcode. If you put stuff down here, design, the post office will put a white sticker over it so they can print the barcode. So you got to consider that. The back of the envelope, it could have a square flap or a pointed flap. To me, pointed flap feels more informal and friendly. I don't know. What do you think, Professor Kira? I always think square flap is kind of business, like a buttoned up suit. And this is more.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what the back of the envelopes look like that I get bills.
Bills are square, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I never
This
thought
is,
about it. Oh,
this is a little easier to open. Everything has an association.
true.
That's why I asked you, because we're like, what do you think? All right. So envelope and letterhead, simple. Logo, address, maybe the web address. Some more examples. Lucky Bucket Brewing kind of has a retro thing, a wax seal, a flood color on the flap. This is a square flap. And there's the letterhead. They've got the word mark and then the emblem, I would say, and a little bit of information at the bottom. They also created this ribbon element that kind of fits with the wax seal and the retro look. So you can create additional elements like that. Capture Studios, they created a kind of pattern that almost functions like a texture out of their icons. And again, nice flood color, pretty simple palette. They did the address vertically up the side. That's acceptable, different. This is Charleston Naturally. So Charleston, South Carolina, a beautiful bay. This logo looks like a crane, but it's actually 2 leaves. And you see this simple element of lines here. What does this make you think of, these lines across the bottom? A river, yeah, water. Probably Charleston Bay, the gentle waves. But then tilt them on their side, stand them up, and suddenly they're like seagrass, right? A little bit of touch of green in the background kind of gives it earthy feel. The paper texture, this recycled paper, really works with this brand. And if you look at the business card close up, it's blind embossed, no ink. And this wonderful paper makes it feel like something you might find on the beach, right? Instead of a business card. All right, so I've dumped a lot of information on you guys. Any questions at this moment? We've not heard a peep from Dominic. All right, I'm moving on. All right, this is what it looks like. There's a mock-up template. So let me jump over to, oh no, I already got it. I showed it to you. All right. So creating a color palette. So color palette, that's what we're all about. It's color theory. So this actual photo is the floor of a screen printer here in town. I just took a picture of their floor. So what do? You're going to start off by doing this exercise, and there's a video that shows you how to do that. This is a page out of your presentation template. What you're going to do is take your assigned color, put it in here, and figure out all the color relationships based on your assigned color. The purpose of this is merely to give you a starting point to explore color palettes for your brand. None of these are dictated. You don't have to use any of these. You can go totally off into a different direction. You could say, I like the pentagram, but I'm going to swap out the red for another color. But I don't want you to get locked into one of these relationships. Unlike the hero portrait, you do not have to do a specific color relationship. It's up to you what you want to do. And then once you get your colors figured out, you're going to spec them out in this page. And this gives you the RGB and hex number, the CMYK mix, and the Pantone color. Now, the way I would work on this is I would start with Pantone because that's the most limited color gamut. There are less colors in Pantone than anything else. So you figure that out and then work backwards. Go to CMYK next and then RGB. RGB has the most colors, so you want to do that last because you don't want to create a color in RGB that you can't replicate in CMYK or Pantone. So I've got this set up this way, but start from the bottom, work to the top. All right, you must have 5 colors in your color palette. I say this every month, and every month I get people with 3 or 4 colors. Also, you can have no black and no white in your color palette. So black and white don't count. You can use black and white in your designs, but do not have them as part of your 5 color palette. I'm just going to stay a beat on this so that people watching the video will at least see it for 1 second as they scan through. Look at your creative brief. Start with your 10 keywords and look at those words in comparison to the colors you're picking. If your words are like bold and strong and powerful and you've got all pastel colors, you need to rethink it. So that's what the purpose of those 10 keywords is to help you figure out what your colors should be, what your type should be, all those things. How do the colors relate to each other? So they all play different roles. Some will be background colors, some are foreground, some are part of your logo, some are part of packaging and different things. So you want to think about that. You can do 5 colors, starting with your assigned color and picking out 4 others. And as I said, they don't have to be any special relationship. These are our levers of color. We're going to push these around. So the hue, only one of your hues is dictated. That's your assigned color. The rest of them are up to you, up for grabs. Saturation, light, how much white is in the color, brightness, how much black is in the color, and temperature, how warm and cool it is. So as you think through these 5 colors, you want to think about the relationship between them. I'm going to go back a second. So if you look at this color palette, there's a strategy here, believe it or not. So this is their assigned color, this blue. They went for the complement, but they did a tint of the complement. It's not the straight complement, it's lighter. Then they did sort of shade of the complement, a little darker. And then an even darker version of the complement. And then they took their assigned color and took the brightness down. So there's a little bit of a formulation going on there. This color becomes more of a background. Some of these darker colors represent foreground elements. So that's how you're thinking it through. And yes, 5 colors, no black and white. All right, so where were we? Look at nature. Kira, this is Palmer's nursery.
Oh, I love that nursery.
I know. I couldn't
Dan-
believe how beautiful it was. Full of color. Look at great images. These are Annie Leibovitz photos she did for Disney. I love Annie Leibovitz. These are uncharacteristic images of hers. Fashion. Fashion makes a difference. You may say, I'm not really into fashion. Well, now you are because you're a designer. So you're going to look at color palettes. You're going to look at all that. Anybody recognize who this is?
I know.
All right, Dominic, you're on. He's not answering. He's watching The Voice or something. I don't know.
I was watching Dragula before the session.
All right, Professor Kira, who is it?
It's Tilda Swinton.
Yes, you all remember her from Narnia, the Ice Queen. That's what most students remember. Yes, Dominic, you're there. All right. The award shows in Hollywood every year, there's a fashion parade, and I always watch it because I want to see the color palette. So this is from 2012, I think. There was a lot of red, a lot of metallics. There's M&M. Yeah. And then this was from 2018. Anybody know why they're all wearing black? I know. Prince died. Oh, gee, I didn't think of that.
It's a hard
Um,
year.
that's a cool theory, but actually it's for the Me Too movement. They were in solidarity as part of the Me Too movement. Now, all black, but it's still Hollywood. So there's a lot of bling, there's a lot of metallics, a fair amount of lace and design and feathers and all that. So even sort of limited color palette, there's still a lot going on. And then this was this past year, 2019 Golden Globes. Color is back, but kind of dark, rich colors. Not what you'd expect, really. This macrame dress is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I love it.
And then, ta-da, the color of the Golden Globes. This color stood out so spectacularly. She just really picked an amazing color to use for her dress and hair to match. And I don't know if I have a strong feeling this is probably a consideration, but how it contrasts with the red carpet
Yeah.
is pretty good. So you are now a fan, at the very least, of fashion and looking at that. As a designer, you're always looking.
You know, one thing that's interesting is it doesn't seem like the Pantone color of the year really has any sort of weight on what people are
Yeah,
wearing.
I think it has a certain ambient effect, so that there's stuff out there that's all sort of in that color. And then the real fashion makers, like Lady Gaga and stuff, they're going to go a different direction
Of
and
course.
sort of stand out. So there's plus and minus to being the only color predictor in the world. It's like everyone's going to use your color, yes, but then it's easy to go and be different. All right, so Matisse said, when I put colors together, they have to join a living chord, like a musical chord or harmony, which is such an amazing statement when you think about music as air and vibration, the vibrations and frequency of sound, but light vibrating is what color is. The different vibrations, different frequencies create the different colors we see. So there's definitely a connection there. Matisse was such a prolific artist and he loved color, spectacular use of color. And he lived in this part of the world, in France, the Mediterranean, the bright sunlight, the blue waters, very distinctive kind of feeling. Here is a painting by Andrew Wyeth. Andrew Wyeth did not live in the Mediterranean. He lived in New England, and this is sort of this winter New England landscape. This painting, anybody seen this painting before? No, all right. This is a famous painting called Christina's World, and it's most often cited as an example of composition because of this incredible high horizon line and the dynamic form pointing right to the farmhouse up there. But what I want you to look at is the grass. So this is winter grass. It's kind of brown and dying, right? This is painted on a wooden board, and he actually kind of scratched in the grass. But look at how much color is actually there. There's orange, blue, green, red, all sort of undulating throughout this grass. An incredibly rich color palette when at first you might think this is just dead winter grass. It's really got a lot of life to it. Do you guys see that? Maybe, yes, I hope. All right. Albrecht Bierstadt was a German immigrant, came to America and went out west and did these amazing large canvases of the American West. He was part of a school known as the Hudson River School, and they sometimes call them luminism. So the sky just seems to glow with the sun pounding through those clouds. If you imagine the mid 1800s when there was no real electric light and people saw these paintings and they were blown away, they felt like they were glowing right off the canvas. They showed them in New York. You know, you pay like a quarter, which was a lot of money back then, to go see them, and everyone was inspired to go west and settle the American West. And so in that way, they were very inspiring. Not so good for the Native Americans, but thus the history of America. And his paintings are very realistic. This is the domes of Yosemite, and it really looks like that. He wasn't exaggerating. This painting is like 15 feet high. This was, Kira, this was on display at the Morse Museum, and I missed it. I knew it was there, and I
Really?
could never get over there. Yeah, it was on temporary display there.
Oh, bummer.
Huge painting. All right, Gauguin, another impressionist. Gauguin was a bank teller up until the age of 40. He was considered himself sort of a failure because his dad wanted him to go to law school and he didn't go, and all of a sudden he said, I'm going to be a painter, and he moved to Tahiti. Did these incredible paintings. Now, if you see this painting, you can see obviously we're in filtered light underneath a roof. There's bright sunlight out here, a little less saturated color. And then they're sitting on these wooden boards, but look at these wooden boards. They're just flooded with color, lavender, pink, orange, blue, yet they still look like wood. And it sort of gives you the feeling of this bounce light. You see her foot has a sort of green highlight going on. Amazing observations about color in the very early stages of the world of photography. Here's another Gauguin. These forms feel so solid and real, and this yellow background creates this vibrant popping out of the forms. Yeah, the dresses and all that. And these mangoes. Mangoes are the coolest thing to paint because they go from red to green. There's like a complementary gradient in nature that really doesn't, typically gradients, if you go from one complement to another, it turns to mud. But mangoes don't do that. Anyway, what can you do for inspiration? Paint mangoes. What do you guys think? Look at nature. When you play video games, you're going to look at the color palette being used. When you go to the grocery store, you're going to look at the color palette being used. When you go to the movies, you're going to look at color palette being used. You're going to see it everywhere on the web, and everything that's designed and in nature. So now you are a fully fledged student of color, and this will be your lifelong pursuit. Right, Kira?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of looking on Instagram and following certain artists and stuff like that.
Yes. All right, remember that your assigned color is supposed to be the hero of the show, so you're sort of creating around that. I would say think about it like a family. So which one's the black sheep? Who's the wild one? There they are, the whole family. uh, Contrasting hues, contrasting temperatures. Now, we talk about hierarchy in design. Usually people think hierarchy, well, the biggest thing on the page is the most attention getting, but not so much. This is Jessica Heish's work. She's a fantastic type designer. And clearly the focal point becomes the area of color. Here's another one. So that focal point of color becomes dramatic and makes a point. Values, black and white, you're thinking about that as well. This is sort of fan art based on The Shining. This photo, I love this photo. So all these people along the side here are getting the same photo, but this photographer got a different photo, a different thesis. And clearly she's the focal point because of the white dress. But if you see, this is more of a story of what it's like to be 20 years old and facing all this, because that's about how old she was. But interesting way of light and shadow creating a focal point. Experiment. Illustrator has fantastic tools to let you play with color, and you're going to see those in some of the videos. Create lots of color palettes. This is more Jessica Heish work. If you see, she's got orange, purple, and the third part of the triadic would be green. But instead of green, she's got this kind of light blue, creates an interesting color palette, different. Red, blue, and yellow, but no, not yellow, green. The story of Matilda, she's this girl who goes to this horrible school, but she has this sort of magical ability. You see the gray chalkboard in the background sort of represents her dismal existence, and then these splashes of color create the sort of magic in the foreground. We use colors to organize things by flavor, by variety. You could tell what these taste like even if you couldn't read. Organizing varieties of wine, of coffee. Start with the Pantones, then CMYK, then RGB. That's how I want you to work. You want to put it all together. This is why I'm saying you design your pieces, put it together and get a look at it. Sometimes you squint at it and say, does this work? Is one thing popping out too much? Or is everything sort of bland? You're trying to figure that out. This is a work of Lure Design here in town. Purple and yellow complementary colors, and then a splash of this light green, kind of really throwing a wrench in it, but making it very cool looking, giving it texture and dimension. Orange and pink, two colors you wouldn't think go together, creating a place for this knockout white. These are all great screen prints by Lure. Contrasting hues, I talked about that. I'm kind of rushing because we're running out of time, but focal point. Now here's that gradient from orange to blue, really well done. Creates a sort of warm light on this blue surface rather than creating mud. This is more Jessica Heish. The black actually pops out pretty strongly. I said that. All right, so let's look at the assignment quickly. So this is the assignment for this week. This exercise, like I said, is really just to give you a sense of where your color stands amongst other colors. It is not going to dictate your color palette. So you do this, there's a video here that shows you how to do it. It's pretty easy. And once you're done with that, check the box, you're finished with that part. Identity package. This is where your design work comes in. You're going to use this Illustrator template, use your logo in color, use additional elements, use paper texture, all those things I talked about. Create a cool identity package. Here's a video that shows you how to use that. And then you're going to spec out your color palette on this page, and here's a video that shows you how to do that. So 3 videos, 3 parts of the assignment. The rubric is not correct, but it's more complicated than that. You're going to be judged on all three tasks: the identity package, the color palettes, and the fact that you did this first part as well. So I'll have to fix that. All right. Back to the presentation. Here we are. So jump in, start working on your identity package. Post whatever you have by Thursday at noon, and I'll give you feedback on where you're at. Provide some feedback to a peer. This is a very important part of the assignment. You should take it seriously, because when you think about somebody else's work, it helps you think about the process in your own work as well. And then by Sunday, you're going to wrap up the whole assignment and have a successful week. So any questions about the assignment at this moment? Yes, 5 colors. No black, no white. You do not have to use all 5 colors in your logo. Your logo could be 1 or 2 colors, probably 2, I would say, at least. But you don't have to use all 5. You're kind of keeping these colors in reserve because you'll use them other places. And as you think about your letterhead business card envelope, you may use more colors there. You may use also images, textures, patterns, graphic elements. As you look at your logo process, and Sarah, I'm going to use you as an example because I've got yours up and it's a good example. Say you went with the voodoo doll, right? Well, maybe you turn this little steamboat into a pattern brush, and it becomes a rule, a line going across. Or maybe you've got different versions of the gator as a pattern or something else, or he comes into part of one of the business cards or something. You can sort of mix up, as you worked on this, you have additional elements to sort of bring in there. You could also look at the logo you're using. So for instance, this mouth is stitched. So maybe you create a pattern brush with stitching, and you could use that in different parts of your business card and elsewhere. That makes sense? Yes, all right. All right, so that's what I have for tonight. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to stop the recording.